Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. Appreciate everybody swinging out on this Friday evening. Hopefully, your week is winding down. You got all the work stuff done, all your honey to do projects done. Yeah, right. Let's be honest, it's always there, right? I don't think it ever ends. At least mine, anyway. But to be fair, I put a lot of stuff off, so it's all good. Want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors of the show and partners. Always start out with our main sponsor, Higher Love. As you see them above me here, we got a nice promo code for everyone to use when they get a chance to stop into the store. You can use that online or in person. Make sure you tell the folks there that you're with Let's Legalize Wisconsin. Great staff up there, friendly folks, and the products are top tier for sure. Tactical's here. What's up, Tac? Thanks for swinging by. Jill's here. Heather's here. Holy cow, they're rolling in. Appreciate you guys swinging by. Really excited for tonight's show. Let's finish up, though. We also got Ignite Dispensary down here to my side. Shout out to them. If you're looking for products in Wisconsin that are legal, we've got locations Milwaukee, Spooner, Hayward, Superior, Manitowoc, and New Richmond. And I think they're working on another one soon. Pay attention to that one. Super excited for tonight's guest. Pulling up my notes, did a little research on the gentleman who we got joining us. Cry says, stay lifted, folks. Absolutely. We've got Phil Anderson in the house. Phil is a dedicated libertarian activist. He has a history of involvement in both activism and electoral politics. He's actually been on the Libertarian National Committee and held leadership roles within Wisconsin's Libertarian Party. Basically, his platform, from my understanding, it centers around promoting individual liberty, limited government, amen to those, physical responsibility, and challenging government corruption. Sounds like a few things we could use out there. Well, let's stop yapping about them. Let's get them in here. Phil, how we doing, sir?
Great, Bobby. How are you?
I'm doing good. Really appreciate you taking some time out of your week to hang out with us and chat it up. And yeah, man, just excited to have you here. Really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You bet, man. I always like to kind of get just a feel of kind of what got you in. Obviously, your big thing right now is being a part of the Libertarian committee or trying the Libertarian candidate for Help me out here, Phil.
All right. Yeah, I'm actually running as an independent, but I am a Libertarian running for United States Senate in Wisconsin.
There we go. Thank you, sir.
That's taking up most of my non-work time right now.
Sure. The folks in the comments are saying hello. Appreciate you guys being nice. Sometimes they get rowdy. You never know. So
hello.
Always like to get a little bit about kind of what got you started in the industry or in the field that you're in. So could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to pursue a career in politics? What got you started?
Well, back 2008 and 2010, I just saw how things were really becoming corrupt. I was and still am to a certain extent, a big fan of Ron Paul, and saw how when he was running for president in 2008, 2012, that the media was basically like leaving him out of polling results and leaving him off the debate stage and things like that. And I'd already been kind of suspicious of government for most of my life, but that really kind of triggered something. And so I decided to get involved as a candidate in 2014. I ran for state assembly for where I lived then in Fitchburg, right outside of Madison, and then just gotten more and more involved ever since. You kind of went over my resume, so I won't go through that again. But I've also been very passionate. I mean, like you said, I'm very passionate about personal liberties, which includes a variety of things, but also against government corruption, because what we've seen over the course of my whole lifetime, pretty much, is government willingness to lie about things, to mislead us, and to suppress the truth. And that goes to a lot of different specific issues, but it also applies to cannabis. They've been lying about its effects, and supposedly it's dangerous, and it's not, all these sort of things for a long time, telling untruths about it. And in my mind, and this again applies to lots of issues, if you just follow the money, you can see exactly who's paying for the politicians to say those things, right? They're just funded by lobbyists, big pharma, big oil, big paper, if that really exists, but it does in Wisconsin. Sure. All of those are threatened by legal cannabis in its various forms. And that's why I've been involved in this issue for a number of years. is because it's just one facet of how the government is basically screwing us over and continues to do so.
Sure. Right on. I can appreciate your, what got you into it and what keeps you going. And unfortunately, I think it'll be there for a while. But it's great to know there are folks that are trying to help with that. And
Hmm.
it's sometimes it's tough because I'm sure it's similar to like with cannabis advocacy, where there's days where it's like, well, we didn't accomplish what we're trying to do, but I think we got to start with informing the people and getting that information out there.
Absolutely,
So it's
absolutely. And part of the one of the early hurdles we need is to have um, cannabis available to be for experiments and tests and
sure,
medical research and that sort of thing. I know there's some, but I know there's also legal hurdles to that happening too. So that
sure,
would bring forth the truth about it that we all know,
right.
and that it's safe and should be completely legal as growing your own tomatoes, in my estimation.
Yep, that's a
But
great way to put it.
one hurdle at a time. But I think we're seeing a little movement federally. President Biden mentioned it, I think, about a month ago, moving it to Schedule 3 or something like
3,
that.
yep,
But I mean, that's not enough for me, obviously, probably not enough for you either.
sure,
But at least it is. I think he's responding to the momentum of states starting to legalize it,
sure.
which is, there's progress, but there needs to be more and faster.
Absolutely. And it's also one of those when you're just kind of talking about the government and, it's not, I feel like when it was made, it was meant to be like this truthful organization that's really about the best thing for the people and working together. But it just seems kind of crazy that really things only start to happen. It seems like no matter what side of the aisle it is, when it's getting ready to start about elections and that kind of stuff, that's usually when it seems like, oh, all of a sudden we can try to get some stuff done.
Yeah.
um, it's
Yeah.
just pretty interesting. And speaking of that, what's your take on the Wisconsin basically being a closed session now? Does that make sense to you? Is that
No, no, no. Every level of government is getting better and better at hiding things,
right?
and being more brazen about it too. Even the persecution of Julian Assange is ridiculous, and I don't know if your listeners know that whole story, but he's the founder of WikiLeaks, and he's in jail in London, basically for just letting the truth be told about what our government was doing.
Right.
And along with that, that's kind of like the big issue, or the big, the prominent thing that's going on with government lack of transparency. But there's also, every level of government drags their feet with freedom of information requests, which is
Oh yeah,
constitutional and legal, and pretty much in every law at every level of government, you have a right to know what your government's doing. But they slowly release information. They delete emails before they can be released to the public. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse.
sure. We did have a question here. How would you plan to address and try to combat corruption if elected to the Senate?
Well, if I get elected, there'll be one or maybe two of us who are non-Republicans and Democrats. So it'll be a bit of a challenge, but basically my plan is to tell the truth and to use that position to find out exactly what's going on, and not to breach real secrets. We don't want to put anyone's life at risk, our military or people that are serving, that sort of thing.
Sure.
But tell the truth about what's really going on, and demand that the process be transparent. One of the things that I learned, and this is true both in the Senate and the House of Representatives, is that they will have sessions where there's not enough people there. There's not a quorum technically for them to pass legislation. But when there's bills on the floor of either house that they all basically agree on, the ones that are from the big lobbies and they're not going to fight about, they'll often pass them with less than half of the people there.
Sure.
And there are a few good legislators who will stand up and request a roll call vote to reveal the fact that there's not enough people there. But that's the sort of thing. We get drawn into these conflicts that they put out in front of us as theater. Not that they're not important issues,
Sure.
but there's a lot of theater in politics. While behind the scenes and under our radar, they're passing bills that give tax carve-outs and kickbacks and favorable legislation to the biggest lobbies who give money to both big parties. And that's the kind of thing I want to help reveal to the public, so that we can see exactly how our government actually works, relative to how it's supposed to work or how we were taught should work,
Sure.
and hopefully put pressure, help with public pressure to get it back to the way it should be.
Sure. Well, and yeah, it's one thing that's always confused me, and I just want to see if we're on the same page as far as like I think this kind of fits the bill of just some of the tactics that are used that kind of quick or just don't the game, I guess. And that's it seems like it's not just, hey, let's talk about cannabis legalization, let's work together on this topic, but somehow it gets bundled into this bill that has just preposterous amounts of different, like, I didn't know the farm bill covered so many different
Oh
outlets
yeah.
of, and it's just like, well, we're not going to pass this because we're at such a difference in this and that. Well, why don't you? It just, I don't know. Do you feel, would that take too much time, or like, do you feel like something with the bills too is maybe part of the issue when it's
Oh,
so
absolutely.
many things? And
Absolutely. The Farm Bill is a good example, that it covers so much. I think like something like 2/3 of the funding in the Farm Bill is actually the CHIPS program, which is food for people, like they used to call it welfare, but
yeah,
which is fine. I mean, that's great that the government's helping with that to a certain extent. But the fact that they lump it in with the Farm Bill complicates the whole thing, right? It's
right,
called the Farm Bill, and people who, especially in Wisconsin, who love farmers, are going to support the Farm Bill for the farmers, when in fact 2/3 of it is about something different. And not only that, but most of the funding in the Farm Bill goes to the wealthiest farmers in every county, or corporate farmers, and not
right,
smaller family farmers. So
sure,
there's a lot to unpack there. And
well,
another example of that too is and politicians, Tammy Baldwin, Mark Pocan is my congressman, brag about the Inflation Reduction Act. And everything that was in that, none of it was to reduce inflation. It was all government spending. And they brag about things like more money for transit in Madison, or various things that are in the infrastructure or in the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's the opposite effect on inflation. Government spending, especially deficit spending, increases inflation.
right,
So having the bills be named what they are, and having them single subject bills, where if it's the Inflation Reduction Act, that's what it should be. The
right,
farm bill should be farms. The cannabis bill should be about cannabis. It should be that simple so that the public can follow along, but they intentionally obscure that
right,
and use that against each other and use that to fool us.
right. Yeah, okay, yeah. It's just make sure it wasn't just me.
Oh, no, no, no. Anyone who pays attention will see the exact same thing.
Right. Like Heather brings up a good point. If Wisconsinites want it legal, why isn't it? Yeah, it's a great question.
Well, let me answer that. The reason
Oh,
is because the state legislature, and in Wisconsin, it's mainly the Republicans, because I think most of the Democrats are for legalization.
sure.
Uh, but they get a ton of campaign contributions to not make it legal, and that's why they may be morally opposed to it. That's one thing, but but the fact is that they get a ton of money to keep it illegal, and they hide behind this idea that it's dangerous when it's not, or that they have moral beliefs against it when they shouldn't. And these are the same people, I'd call them hypocrites. They're the same people that are happy that Wisconsin is the drunkest state in the country. And we know, and I think most people know who've tried cannabis, who are familiar with people that have tried cannabis, which is like most of the population at this point, know that it's certainly no more dangerous than booze.
Right.
And we believe less dangerous, but certainly no more dangerous than booze, and
100%.
and healthier for you. And there's not any health benefits for alcohol like there are for cannabis. So it's all that's why, basically. And
Not to mention, oh, go ahead.
another reason I'd say too is I think the Democrats have used kind of a poor strategy. I think, as you mentioned, you may have mentioned, I ran for governor in 2018 and spoke at the legalization rally. It was in May, and I was speaking with Tony Evers wasn't there, but I think there were 6 Democratic candidates, Kelda Roys and Mike Crute, and I don't remember who else. And I was there. And all the Democrats, the first thing they talked about was tax revenue, which people have different, I'm not a big fan of taxes, and
Sure.
that's certainly not a selling point for me. It should be about freedom. And I think if the Democrats worked on the freedom issue and the debunking all the myths about it supposedly being unhealthy, and then got it legalized, then people could argue about taxing it or not taxing it or whatever. I don't think it should be. Some people think it should. That's fine. But people who are against taxes don't want to, even if they're for cannabis, don't want to vote it in with a big tax revenue,
Right.
excessive taxation. And we see that in other states, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got family in Illinois, and when I visit them, I go to dispensaries down there, and I'm doing better on price with my local guy, to be honest with you. A
Sure.
lot better, and just
Yeah.
as much selection and et cetera.
Well,
And that's
it's
not
like
really competitive.
I think a good way to look at it is the two different sides of how you could legalize or like the taxing and that, like Michigan and Illinois. Like Michigan is almost not, and I wouldn't call it dirt cheap, but like it's just very reasonably priced. But
Mm.
there's still quite a few dispensaries, and I don't know, it just seems a lot healthier up there as far as the business goes. So would hopefully like to see something like that. We had Mohican Libertarian in the comments here.
Oh, I know him.
Yeah, he's an awesome fellow, big part of us here at Let's Legalize Wisconsin. He wanted to know if you had any comments on the national convention, all the antics.
Oh, well, he knows that that's a long story. Basically, our convention was just this last weekend, and Donald Trump spoke and was booed for a good reason.
Oh
Bobby
yes, I saw like a quick snippet, but what?
Yeah.
How does he get? This was a libertarian convention.
Yeah, he was our leadership invited all of the presidential candidates. Biden, and I think probably not expecting them to speak, not expecting them to show up.
Sure.
But Trump decided, for whatever reason, that he thought he could win over libertarians to his whole thing. And I'm sure there are a few libertarians that like Trump. I would argue that they're not really libertarians if they like Trump, but nonetheless, they self-identify as libertarians anyway. And I think he thought that if he offered, said a few clever things, that we would just fall into his lap and follow him. And it was quite the opposite.
Gotcha.
The only time he got cheers was when he committed to freeing Ross Ulbricht if he were reelected, which is great, but I don't think he knew who Ross Ulbricht was before he got up on that stage and people were holding up signs that said "Free Ross." It was
Gotcha.
a big, kind of a big mess. Bobby was a lot better. Also not a libertarian, but Bobby Kennedy was a lot better. And there just ended up being, with that, and also a lot of drama in electing our new leadership and nominating a candidate for president of the United States. There was just a lot of, and I won't go into it all here. It was just very dramatic, and factions involved and people that are upset how it came out. And so hopefully that'll settle down. I didn't go because we're in the process of gathering signatures to get me on the ballot, and just actually today submitted enough signatures to be on the ballot. So we will be.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks. So I've managed to avoid all that drama myself with the national convention, but it's out there.
Sure. Okay. Right on. Appreciate you touching base on that.
Sure.
Mohican was there. He said it was crazy.
Yeah, he was one of our delegates from Wisconsin.
Oh, very cool. Right on. Campaign goals. What are the primary goals of your current Senate campaign?
To win.
Yeah, I suppose.
That being said, it is a little bit of a long shot, and they basically, this is why. Most people view politics as a right versus left, Republican versus Democrat, or conservative versus liberal. And so that ties people up into thinking about most campaigns as two candidates running. And so it becomes very difficult for them to consider a third party candidate or an independent candidate. The other problem is that both big parties are very heavily funded, get a lot of money from lobbyists, industries, unions, what have you, billions and billions of dollars, and have a lot of PACs supporting them. And the reason that they do is because they pay back those campaign donations with favorable legislation, which I mentioned before, tax carve-outs. Anybody who is from one of those big industries, big pharma, for example, can always go and see a legislator in the Senate or the House whenever they need to. As a matter of fact, they write the bills. Pretty much everything that goes through the Senate and the House is written by a lobbyist, not by a legislator, and is expected to be passed because they're paying that money. And that's why candidates like Tammy Baldwin, Eric Hovde, everyone else is so well funded. So we have the challenges are to be considered as one of many, as opposed to not being one of the two, and then raising money and spending our money wisely to get noticed enough so that people are aware that I'm running and that I'm viable. And it's just a matter of being, making the debate stage and that sort of thing to be considered.
True.
Public awareness is the biggest hurdle.
Gotcha. Right on. Well, we'll do what we can. We don't lean either side of the aisle, that's for sure. And to me, the more options, the better, especially when we're talking about trying the state of Wisconsin and trying to figure out what the hell is going on with that as far as politics and everything. And like you bring up a good point, because I've voted both sides of the aisle. I voted Libertarian. I voted all over. I try to take people for what I feel. I feel like I've always had this sense of like a bullshit meter. And I try to be like, well, I feel like if I fell down and these two walked by, this guy would at least help me up. Or, I don't always have it's just so hard to trust what you hear, but like, it just seems like most of this stuff, it just seems kooky to me. Like the whole, the Eric guy jumping in the lake in the cold. Well, but he didn't even jump. Like he
was just
probably had a bodysuit on. Like, I don't know. It's just so cheesy. And
I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of talking about my
competition,
my opponents, but neither one of them do a good job of either being or seeming sincere. They both either by campaign design or they lack that as people. And I don't know which. I don't know either of them personally, nor have I interacted with them in person. But they both are very stiff, seemingly empty pantsuit, and people see through that. And you can see in the history of recent history of American politics, the people that are likable do well. Barack Obama was very likable, and there are people that voted for him in 2008 expecting him to do certain things, including get cannabis fully legalized, which he said he would do. And to this day, we'll forgive him for that because he's likable. And there are other people, maybe Donald Trump's an interesting story in that regard, I think, because he's not likable, at least in my estimation. He's not likable, but he does seem to be sincere, right? Like that's a whole different bullshit meter. You know what I mean? Because he believes what he's saying. It still might be bullshit. I don't know. But and Ronald Reagan was that way. Bill Clinton was that way. They're very likable people, and so they get away with doing things in office that other people might not. And getting votes because people you want to feel comfortable with your representation,
right?
And I feel like that person is one of us. They're
exactly.
from Wisconsin or whatever.
They're speaking for us, and I think that's where.
That is, you can smoke a joint with them, whatever that is.
Well, and that's sort of like, I just feel like there's very few politicians out there that I've ever interacted with, that or just watched them on whatever, whether it's news, social media, whatever, that it felt like this is real, genuine, a person. It unfortunately, it seems like too many people don't want to touch base on cannabis because they don't know exactly how to. Just tell me how you feel. I'm not going to say, oh, you said it should be legal. Now like it just seems like everyone's kind of, not everyone, like I said, there's a few good ones out there, but there's a lot of, I don't know. It's just very frustrating. I heard a lot of stories because early on, I had quite a few people like, hey, you should run as a state representative or something. And for a hot minute, I actually thought about it. But then I had quite a few people that know politics pretty well at the state level. And the thing that I hear a lot of is you get elected, you do a couple of years of, hey, I'm doing the change I talked about, or whatever. But then when it comes up to re-election, that's when it's like, oh, you wanted to keep doing this? Well, you need to do everything we say, essentially. And it's just like, that's got to be.
That's very true. That's how the Republican and Democratic leadership, federally and at the state level, that's how they operate. If you get elected and you do what they want you to do and vote how they want you to vote, then they'll keep supporting you. And if you step out on your own on various issues, even if it's not that often, then they prefer to find somebody else that's going to be more cooperative. So then you get primaried. It happens all the time at the federal level and the state level. And that's one of the things, not to say that he's the only one, but the poster child of that is Robin Voss.
Oh, yeah.
And he runs the Republican Party of Wisconsin with an iron fist, and he gets what he wants, or he's ruthless. And I knew that. I had heard that even before I was involved in politics, and have seen it from the people that I know in the state legislature. There's just no dissent. And so that's how really they've done so well, despite being in a minority in statewide voting, for the recent governor elections, Supreme Court elections, et cetera. Yet they managed to have control of the legislature because they're disciplined. And they're disciplined because you can't not be on the team. You have to be on the team. Right. And I don't know, the Democrats are probably the same way to a certain extent, but I'm just more aware of it on the Republican side.
Sure. No, I agree with that. You kind of touched base on this on a little bit, but I just want to maybe pick a little more at government overreach. Can you share your views on how government overreach impacts citizens, and just some basic reform that you would propose?
Well, the way I would think about government overreach is referring back to the Constitution. There are a lot of things that the government, first of all, the federal government, well, the state government too, they're supposedly to serve us as representatives of us, but also to safeguard our freedoms by respecting the Constitution, in the state and in the national government, the federal Constitution. For the longest time now, they've been basically at war with that Constitution, constantly trying to erode it. Every single amendment. With the First Amendment, you see it with the persecution of Julian Assange, and with trying to infiltrate and successfully influence the biggest social media platforms and get them to give them data and to help them spy. NSA spying is another First Amendment thing it's an overreach. The Second Amendment, they're trying to erode people's ability to defend themselves, and using very tragic things that have happened to try and get gun control into legislation. And I'm all for responsible gun use and gun owners being responsible, but they go way over the mark on that. Every single amendment of the Constitution is abused and at war between the citizens who are trying to stand up for their rights and the government who's warring against it. And it shouldn't be that way. And the only reason it goes back to, who do these people actually represent at the state and federal level? They don't represent people that voted for them. They represent people that give them money to continue to pay for ads to stay in office.
All right. Yeah, and I've noticed that firsthand where so I kind of explained to you a little bit when we were in like the green room or whatever before we started. I never planned on getting too involved with politics at all, and just because a few things you've touched on in that, and it's just like that just sounds really complicated. I don't know what I'm doing, that kind of thing. But the amount of people that I've reached out to try to talk to them, sit down with them, whatever it may be, that are at the state level, and going into it, I'm like, this guy's not going to talk to me. But then you end up talking to this person, you sit down with them, and then they're very much aware that cannabis is not this terrible thing. Mm-hmm. But there's some folks around here that, we got a blah, blah, blah. And it's like, so who do you work for?
Exactly.
I can definitely attest to that. We got Mohican says, would you stop Congress from trading stocks?
Yes.
That would make sense, right?
Yes. And I follow. What's amazing to me too is that something's happened in the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, where Congress has basically stopped even trying to hide a lot of this stuff. Like, you can go on Robinhood, which is a very common stock trading app. There's an add-on app, I forget what it's called, but it works with in conjunction with Robinhood. I forget the name of it because I don't use it anymore. But you can have it set up so that it will mimic Nancy Pelosi's stock trading, or Tommy Tuberville, or these other very active stock traders who are in Congress, either in the House or in the Senate. And they make a ton of money by knowing they know things that are going to happen before they happen. The most egregious one was COVID. A lot of these legislators knew, Nancy Pelosi in particular, knew that the government was going to come out on the COVID thing, and that they were planning to do that. So she and many others bought stock in pharmaceutical companies before the public knew that the thing was going to blow up. We knew that something was going on with COVID, but didn't know it was going to turn into an emergency, right, or fake emergency, depending on how you look at it.
Sure.
and there's lots of other things too. They know who they're going to award defense contracts to,
Great.
and then and all of a sudden there's it's so crooked. And some people think it's harmless because I don't know, because it's not really taking money away from somebody else, but it's certainly not fair. The plan should be they should have to put all their money or all their whatever in a trust. Somebody else should manage it. It's kind of hard to really get it out of the hands of their families. So they're probably going to profit to some extent, but at least put up as many barriers as possible.
Sure.
People to abuse their, what they know.
Completely agree with that. Because it's funny. It's not funny, but I know from time to time you'll hear of people that get busted for insider trading. But it's like usually it's nobody in Congress or anything.
I don't know what they'd have to do. I mean, that's been a topic for other people though. But that's one of those things that the occasional Democrat or Republican will bring up, but they're really in the minority because the bigger picture is that's a draw to get wealthy people to run for Congress. If people had to give up their stock portfolio, I mean, would Eric Hovde be running if he couldn't trade stocks in the Senate? I don't know. Right. He's got plenty of money already. He owns a couple of banks or something. But if they had to set all that money aside and live on $170,000 a year for 2 years or 6 years or whatever, how many people would choose it? And basically, Congress, at least as far as Democrats and Republicans go, is for people that are either already wealthy or want to be wealthy off of it. So that's how they attract the people that they do.
Gotcha. Pete just got here. He's a big part of the movement and checks in with the podcast all the time. He says, "I already like this guy, and I just got in here." Pete, make sure you rewind and watch. I think we got a unique opportunity to try to help the gentleman that we have here. You just get somewhere because I don't know. I feel like it's just always bothered me since I can remember the whole, especially going through when COVID happened. Just the fact that I could just tell based on how you were acting, I could tell who you were voting for.
Oh yeah.
That, and that just blows my mind that like I fell into a unique opportunity because I tried to always have a unique opportunity where like my wife's mom is a doctor. So I'd sit down with her and, but I feel like there's just millions of people that are just like, well, he said it was bad. This is the dumb, and just everything. And it's just so divided. Yeah. It's really frustrating. So anybody who's trying to not be a part of that division, I'm all for.
Yeah, I'm trying to disrupt that whole program. And I know it's a long shot, but somebody's got to try. I'll try. I'll help other people who are trying, whatever it takes.
Appreciate it. Tactical says, when it becomes legal, where's the party going to be? That's a good question.
Am I throwing the party? If I get elected, my party will be smoky, and it'll be in Madison somewhere. I haven't decided yet, but it's still 5+ months away. But there will be, as a matter of fact, I will promise you this. If I'm elected to the United States Senate, my office will be smoky.
Let's go. All right.
Regardless of the rules. And I'll fight over that because, not a lot. I have to, I understand. I understand there are strains for work. There are strains for focus. There are strains for creativity. I explore all that in my personal life. Sure. So it won't just be, the stereotypical use.
Right. Well, and that's the thing too. I know so many of the state officials use it, and like one of them was telling me, I forget where it was, kind of like a field trip for politicians somewhere in Colorado. There was some big thing that a lot of them went to, and while you were there, you could pick different things to do. Mm-hmm. And they saw one about like a dispensary and going to a grow, but that was the only one that was filled up already. So it's just like we know what happens. So the fact
public has a lot to learn about the uses, and not just the medicinal uses, but the positive, the variety of recreational uses. It's not just about, getting stoned and ordering pizza. There's a lot of really good uses for it, professionally, personally, self-medicating in a good way, rather than people just, drinking themselves to sleep every night. There's so many better things to it than are portrayed and are talked about. And I'm aware of those and partake of those occasionally. That's a lot of it too. Not just is it dangerous, but how is it beneficial?
Sure, definitely. And I forgot too that you're kind of in the area. I'm helping out with the advocacy efforts for Hemp Fest this year, so I'll get in touch with you to see if we can't get you down there.
Oh, please do. Yes.
Yeah, looking forward to that. So I'd love to have you be a part of that. Mohegan says replace plastic with hemp products, right? That would be amazing. And
Yeah.
I definitely feel like the only reason that hasn't happened is because, like you said, lobbying, money,
Big
all these
oil.
big
It's
companies.
petroleum.
Yep,
Petroleum is made into plastic. So of course, anything
exactly.
that cuts into, and notice too that not only cannabis, but even basic things like aspirin, are the simplest cures, the simplest remedies, even even COVID, right? This is a little bit of a tangent, but it won't take long. Our healthcare system generally, doctors don't want to tell you to make lifestyle changes or don't want to give you basic things. They're incentivized to write prescriptions. So that's how medicine has changed a lot in the last 50 years or whatever. But the best advice at the beginning of COVID would have been get outside, fresh air, get rid of some of the risk factors like take better care of yourself, exercise, vitamin D, all of these things would have been by far, and many of us knew it then, but now certainly since, far more effective at preventing either catching it or having bad effects of it than the supposed vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for any sort of illness or whatever. One of the things that Bobby Kennedy talks about is the epidemic of chronic disease in the United States for the last 50 years. And that has a lot to do with the over medicating, over pharmaceutical industry, turning drugs into food and food into drugs, whatever, all these things that it basically poisoned a lot of people. And one of the things that's been left demonized unfairly, left by the wayside, and used as a weapon against the African American community, certainly, is the fact that cannabis is illegal.
Right.
It's like one of the worst things ever.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. And we got Tactical says he wants to have you pick your own pound farm.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
That would be nice, especially for people who don't have a garden or aren't the greatest at it, as we were talking about before with me. Brandon says medical marijuana has helped me get over my Xanax use and made it a lot easier to cut the use. That's awesome to hear, man.
That's a good point, Brandon. I've got a friend who's doing the exact same thing. She smokes and she doesn't have to use all those pharmaceuticals that are terrible. They are destructive to your liver. They're expensive. They're giving money to these huge corporations when you can give money to your grower or to your dealer.
Definitely, yeah, it's scary, really. Heather says her doc is for cannabis. He tells us to smoke one all the time.
Oh, awesome, Heather. And you should share your doctor's name.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Pete is on the RFK train, he says. Right on. We got Tactical says he's a veteran and he got labeled a cannabis abuser from the VA. I've heard the unfortunate situation. Same with non-veteran medical. I guess it's just a doctor thing. The craziest one I had was, well, there's a lot of crazy ones, but yeah, just all you got to do is say I've used it, and the doctor just can change your chart and it can completely change the outcome of your insurance. And one had a custody battle with their kid then, and yeah, it's just
that's another issue as veterans. We know a lot of people know that cannabis is really good for PTSD. It should be the start of it, but when people and don't get me started on war in the first place, because that would be a whole other podcast. But when our people come home after being lied to and sent to go fight in places all around the world for no good reason, they come back sick from the traumatization that happens with serving in combat. And then they're prescribed all this other medication and not cannabis. And then when it comes time for that medication to end, they go through withdrawal and sometimes end up with even more non-medicated mental illness, and then looking for those things on the street. And that's what part of the fentanyl problem is, that people are getting street drugs when in fact the process should have started with cannabis or something related to cannabis, some variation of it to help them with the PTSD in the first place. And there are still, and this really, Memorial Day was last weekend, and it's a tough day for me. 17 veterans a day committing suicide. 17 a day. 17 a day. That's a lot. And a lot of it is due to mental illness that could be treated or helped or whatever with cannabis, as opposed to the roller coaster of trying to deal with mental health issues with these high-end pharmaceuticals.
Right.
It's a huge issue. And cannabis ends up in a lot of issues being, if not the way to solve the problem, but a way to help solve a problem.
Sure.
Even criminal justice reform. I mean, there's so much involved that leads back to the ridiculous illegalization of criminalization of a plant.
Completely agree with you there. Heather was wondering, I don't know that they do. Do you know if the government still grows? I know they used to. I know there's still a couple recipients of, and I can't remember what they were sending them out for, but the government sent joints. There was a program at one point for
I don't know.
something.
I
I
don't
know
know.
there's still a couple of recipients of
If
that.
that's the case, I wouldn't trust it. The government's done so much terrible, shady stuff to people. I think it was in the late 40s and the 50s. They had I think it was the Tuskegee. Was that what it was called? Where they were promised, it was a black community, promised them free health care when in fact they were giving them syphilis and to test syphilis medications on them and didn't even tell them. And there are many, many other examples of the government doing shady stuff. Dosing people with LSD in San Francisco brothels in the 60s. And just I would never trust anything that the government would send me, ever.
I can agree with that. Brandon says, Mr. Anderson, you make a good point with the PTSD. I suffer bad from it and anxiety, and still to this day, medical marijuana has helped more than benzo or Xanax. And it's crazy too. Some of the, obviously being a part of this social media presence, I get a lot of people reaching out, and the amount of people, and I had never really thought of the amount, like the actual people who were actually addicted to heroin for 13 years, and understanding now that for that 13 years they were somebody who's got an addiction, and if they were to even try to go to cannabis instead, that they're still abusing drugs, and now they've come to realize this is way better than heroin and not even close to the same thing. And it just really makes you wonder, and that's just one, I mean, because there are so many different like you said, as far as African American communities and that kind of stuff too. But like, yeah, it's just, I feel like you realize more and more how crazy it's been.
Well, we've got to stop calling it a drug. It's not a drug. A drug is something that's made in a lab, for better or worse. Cannabis is a plant.
I agree with you there. Pete, so he owns Green Swan Hemp Company in Pewaukee. He said, I had a veteran come to my store and told me if it wasn't for a store like mine offering the products I have, he said he wouldn't be alive. That's crazy, man. That's how I got started in this, Phil, was I worked for a Wisconsin hemp company for 2 years, overseeing 5 stores in northern Wisconsin. And, because I had safe access to cannabis, I would go to Michigan or, buddies, whatever. But once I started to see the people come in and stories similar to that, and really start to see, people that are struggling, because for me, it helps with my ADHD, but like I can manage. But to see some of these people that their lives have changed because of cannabis, that's where it was like, okay, this makes no sense. I got to try doing something. And I think that
there's nobody who says the same things about alcohol. I mean, I drink some, but I mean, alcohol, that was kind of my point earlier, right? That there's countless stories of how it helps people in various situations, various stresses, various struggles, whatever it is. And that makes it way better than alcohol or things that are illegal, like cigarettes, which are, I'm not saying cigarettes or alcohol should be illegal, but the idea that it would even be on that level is ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, not to mention just being around people who drink. I don't think I've ever really, I mean, back in high school, sure, but even you think about like the fights you'd get in and stuff, where when it comes to cannabis, I'm like, I don't matter what kind of mood I'm in. If somebody says, hey, you want to come over and smoke? Yeah, because it's going to be fun. We're going to, that's just how it's hand in hand. Jill brings up a good point. She also has PTSD, not being a veteran, but obviously we definitely recognize that, especially in today's world, obviously an accident or something like that is got to be really tough. But even just today's world, I feel like a lot of times it can be easy to feel not just PTSD, but just feel like hopeless or that, there's just so much stuff going on in today's world and so many people fighting every single topic. I don't know, sometimes cannabis, like you said, I guess you could consider it recreational, but at the same time, if you're having one of those days, I feel like cannabis is, for most people, that beautiful, let me get back to not worrying about stuff out of my control at this moment and that kind of stuff. But
yeah, it's not just recreational or medicinal.
right.
It's a flow from one to the other. There's a spectrum, and it can be both.
Sure.
It can, and that's when people are managing their own, like she mentioned, if you're managing your own stress, your own pain, and your own trauma, then the ability to do that, and an accident is a terrible thing, but it could even be just something like an abusive relationship at home or something that's not like physical trauma, but whatever it might be, it helps you cope.
Right.
And it's just I think that's why God put it on the earth, was so to help people cope. And it does, it clearly works. But the government and those who fund it would rather have us dependent on their donors, big pharma, than to be using something legally that we can just grow
Right.
locally. They'd rather have control of it.
Unfortunately. There was a question, where was it here? How do you, or how would you plan to address the concerns of constituents who are opposed to cannabis legalization?
Well, I believe that people should be allowed to live their life as they choose, as long as they don't affect other people's right to do so. That's the basic premise of being a libertarian. And I think it's also the way that I believe most of us were raised too. Like when we were kids, we were taught, don't hit, don't steal, don't, etc. So if you just put it as something that's not really of anyone's business, like, why is this illegal? It's not even really your business. You can be opposed to it in your own life, but what's the case that a person like that could make that the government should prevent me from using it, prevent me from procuring it? Right. What's the argument? What's the public good? And that would basically have to fall back on, well, some stereotype of people who use cannabis, which we easy to poke holes in, or just saying it's bad for people and the government should be in the business of protecting people from bad things. And then you counteract that with saying, well, do you think alcohol and cigarettes and high fructose corn syrup and whatever else should be, all these things are bad for you, demonstrably scientifically bad for you, yet they're legal. So how do you balance that out? It's the trick in it is not knowing the facts. It's in presenting it in a way that's not confrontational.
That's a great way to put it, because I think the people who are against it, and at least from what I can see on the comments on the page and stuff, when people attack, like they'll come in, this is gonna great, now we're gonna have people driving forklifts high, like, no, but anybody who's tried those attacks, I've learned to try to just educate, like, hey, I understand your concern, please understand we people should only use this responsibly. It's not saying, but so many people now are finally just starting to, I'm sure they're not changing their mind and saying, okay, I'm pro cannabis, but they'll just block because it's like, okay, I can't think of anything else at this, So right. I feel like education, but just like you said, it's presenting it the right way. That goes hand in.
Yeah, any idea. And I've learned this in campaigning for public office a few times. There's no benefit to being confrontational, really. And it's not easy. Like you mentioned comments on the podcast here. Yes, I have consumed Technical Smoke Break, and recently, not today, but very recently. Presenting any idea, whether it's cannabis related or not, we have to understand that if you're trying to convince people of something, or to get them to at least open their mind and talk to you, you have to be gentle and open-minded and respectful. Most people aren't mean-spirited in their beliefs. They believe whatever they believe for a reason. And I'm a Christian, and I look at my example as like Jesus, right? Jesus could have punished people that were wicked when he was around the harlots and the tax collectors and the sinners, whatever. He went and ate with them and talked to them and shared with them. And I think that's that, and is shown to be for thousands of years the best way to get people to listen to you and open their mind. Because if you approach it from a confrontational approach, people automatically get agitated. They'll clam up, resist. They'll fall back on insisting on their previous ideas and not even listen. And the whole point is to talk to each other, to discover the truth, to figure out what's best for all of us or each of us, whichever way we look at it, and to figure out a way to live together where we can be peaceful and happy and productive. And
Right.
if we realize that we all have the same goals, different ways of getting there. I mean, the socialists, the Green Party, the progressives, the libertarians, conservatives, all basically want the same things. They want to have some freedom in their life. They want to live their life as they choose. They want their kids educated. They need their health care. They need some prosperity in their life to pay their bills and save up for retirement or whatever. All of these things are common to every human being pretty much, unless they're a psychopath. So getting past, just talking about it in that way, and then let's just decide how to get to that place of prosperity, privacy, happiness, liberty, whatever. Then it can be productive and people can agree to disagree. But until that point, and that's like you were mentioning about politics before and people being agitated on every issue. That's why, because the Republicans and Democrats are trying to drive people to the polls and drive people to make donations based on fear and envy, and not let's just talk about this and figure out what's best.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. And yeah, for some reason, you see the majority of folks do that too, where they, like when we were discussing COVID, I feel like it wasn't just, okay, this is what I'm doing. It was, my party says you shouldn't, like, it just, there's so much hate. There was, I feel like very little people actually could sit down with someone on the opposite side of the vaccine and be like, okay, here's why I decided, can you explain to me why you decided? And then it could walk away and say, we both made the right choice. That's my take on the vaccine. Is you got it, you did the right thing. If you didn't, you did the right thing. Why can't that be a thing? Like, it just,
Exactly.
everything.
And I think the whole beating us over the head with believe the science was that really got me from the beginning. I mean, I was willing to consider every aspect of COVID and what was going on, and there were a lot of libertarians who took the position that people should get vaccinated because you shouldn't be imposed. If you are carrying it, if you're sick with it, that you shouldn't give that to other people if there's a way for you to prevent it. So that was reasonable. But the idea that science should be trusted is not scientific. That's not how science works, and especially government science. And there's so many examples of the government lying to us about things they said were true, that for people to be skeptical would be a natural, rational position on that. And let's wait and see. Let's not rush into anything. Let's look at the actual numbers, etc. But what the two-party system did was to radicalize people into, I'm never getting the jab, I don't trust them, blah, blah, blah. I don't care what you say. And not considering that if the pandemic was real, that they would be harming other people. And on the other side, like you should be completely ostracized. I mean, there are people saying that you should be in jail if you won't get the jab, or, even people saying that people should be killed if they don't get the jab because they're so scared of it. And that's the two poles. There's a perfectly human, neighborly thing in the middle where we could talk about it and try and figure it out together across political divides. And there was very little of that, as we know.
Right. Let's try to end things on maybe a uppity here. We had a question. Can you share any personal experiences or observations that have shaped your views on cannabis? Let's start with, when did you first come across cannabis?
Oh, first time. Okay, so I'm not young. I was a middle schooler a while back, and it was ditchweed that was supposedly, I'm not sure it was real, to be honest with you. But we did smoke it.
Sure.
Ninth grade, lunchtime outside, and something happened. Obviously my experiences with it have changed radically since then.
Sure.
But I didn't really smoke or partake much. A little bit in high school. I spent a couple of years in college where I did regularly. I joined the Army. I spent 3 years in the U.S. Army, which of course I could not then. When I got back, I came back to school at UW-Madison and did fairly frequently, a couple times a week maybe. Even back then, obviously it was very illegal, and we didn't really know what we were smoking.
Right.
We knew it was legit, but it wasn't. We didn't know. I mean, there were like like this is Maui Wowie or whatever the
Sure.
first few ones that were
Right.
who knows if it actually was or not.
Right.
But then and occasionally for the ever since I was that age, and then now my use is not that often. Maybe 2-3 times a week, usually smoking flower. I have used edibles before, but I prefer, just in terms of my management of my use of it, I'd rather have the effects quickly and dissipate quickly. And a gummy or an edible is a lot longer scale for that. Plus, and I'm the same way with alcohol, and the same way with naps. Actually, if I if I partake in cannabis, have a drink, or have a nap, I'm done for the rest of the day for whatever reason. That's just me. So I don't consume during the day for purposes of work, but there are people very, very close to me who do, and I see that. And like on a Saturday, maybe I will have a sativa, and then do something creative or get the yard work done or whatever. And my friends who do that have the same experience. So,
Sure.
Now my process is I obtain it for a couple other people in my life. I'm like the point person because I know who I'm getting it from,
Sure.
and he or she will tell me what they have, and it's usually a choice of maybe 8 to 10 different strains, and we'll look them up on our was it Weedly? What's the name of that? Leafly.
Leafly. There you go. Yeah.
And look at all the reviews, and then decide, and then I'll make the trip across town and enjoy a little bit with the person from whom I'm purchasing it. And then, but it's all very legit. It's all very fresh. I don't know where he or she's getting it from, but that's been my history with it. It's been kind of sporadic. I've never been a daily or close to a daily, but I also, and I'm grateful for this, I haven't, at least as far as I'm aware, had any mental health issues or PTSD or anything like that would have necessitated that. I think I'm, as far as I know, pretty healthy on the day to day. So mainly my use is going to be recreational.
Sure. Fair enough. Do you have a favorite strain?
Strawberry cough I really like.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's a focuser,
Yeah. Get stuff done.
Yep. And actually, this is funny. I like sour diesel too. And I was out getting signatures from a guy I met up with who's an activist, a cannabis activist on the east side of Madison. He was wearing a shirt today that said sour diesel on it. Like,
that's awesome.
Some of that right now.
That's awesome.
But those are two of the good ones. And I enjoy, even like the Leafly app. It has like all or it used to anyway, have the diagrams of all the terpenes on it and stuff. They have all these different, ways of looking at it. It's fascinating. It's just absolutely.
It is really great. And to the fact that this plant that we're discussing, or that some people say is this terrible, it has terpenes, natural terpenes, that are also found in other fruits and vegetables that help you with different things. But the strains can be so different. It's just, it really is, I think, something that's out of our realm of truly understanding all of its benefits. And hopefully we just keep learning more and more about it, and trying to educate folks.
Back on one thing, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Mentioned the Farm Bill earlier, and I just read, maybe you're aware of this, a few days ago, that the Farm Bill that's going to be before the House, somebody added an amendment.
Mary Miller.
To tighten up the Delta 8 stuff and the THC 0 or whatever that is.
THC.
The A.
Right now.
And I don't know. I can understand them tightening up the THCA thing because that's just a loophole that we exploit. The dispensary that's half a block from my house, it's just like, I don't shop there for too much because I like the guy I shop with. But if you're buying THCA, you're just buying marijuana.
Yes, that is true.
And the Delta 8 stuff, whatever. But I just wonder how you feel about that, or how maybe your listeners feel about that, and how it's going to affect their use, if at all.
So we're a pretty split crowd. I don't know that it's necessarily down the middle, as far as people who travel out of state and then people who use products in state. And I think the biggest issue there, So if everybody had, that's why I'll try to highlight the places that are in it for the right reason. The hemp industry in Wisconsin.
Mhm.
There's folks that are like, if you stop into Pete's shop, Green Swan Hemp Company, he doesn't just sell whatever, because there's no regulation in the hemp industry at all.
Mhm.
So I could be in my garage making gummies that will mess you up, and
Yeah.
we call it anything we want and put it on the packaging. But and just like at the gas stations, that product, no, that just sketches me out. That scares the hell out of me that that's even a thing. But for people, it's so hard to find a store with reputable product, because there are good hemp products that are made safely, that have the right effects. Like Delta 8, I actually prefer Delta 8 90, well, not 90, maybe 75% of the time, when I thought it was safely made, because it was like, the my pain relief was the same as stuff from Michigan,
Mhm.
but my focusability, like I could still, my wife could interrupt me and I could go back to my show and not be completely
Ah,
confused.
yep, yep, yep.
But when it comes to the different cannabinoids of the plant, so like CBD obviously has many benefits. I love CBG because it's definitely not an Adderall, but it just gives me like this slight little extra something, little pep,
Mhm.
for daytime use. So I feel like that definitely, and I think the reason that amendment was worked in, my guess would be Big Canna, because
Yep.
in Michigan they don't want that stuff around. But I think, and one of my favorite things is, there's a lot of great companies in the state that make great hemp derived Delta 9 drinks. Um, and
Ah,
again, if we could just figure out some kind of regulation, I think it would go a long way in basically safe access to cannabis legally in the state,
mhm.
which is what we push for. And we got a couple comments here. Pete says THCA and D9 being made illegal would put me out of business. I hear you there. Heather says straight flower, no delta. Peter says CBG is an absolute game changer. I agree with that. So I would like to see it. Basically, what I try to do is check the credibility, check the products that places are selling, and then once you realize, okay, this is one of the good ones, then I'm like, hey, yeah, if you're looking for something in Oshkosh, go to these guys. If you're in Pewaukee, go see Pete.
Yep, yep.
That kind of stuff, because there is good quality hemp products. I don't think that when they wrote the farm bill they were aware of that, but again, it's we got to have some kind of relief for folks that's legal.
Agreed.
And
You always
yeah,
just follow the money to find out why things happen. That's
exactly.
100% true all the
Right.
time. If you just find out who's got a financial interest in something being legal or illegal,
Right.
a law preventing it or requiring it, it's always about who's funding it.
Well, and that's like, so when we first saw that Florida got recreational on the ballot, I was like, oh, that's cool, because they had to go to the state Supreme Court. They had to, because the governor was like, no, we can't do that. They took it to the state Supreme Court, and then the state Supreme Court ruled that yes, it should be on the ballot. So that gave me some hope, like, okay, maybe we can do something like that in Wisconsin. And then as I'm digging into it, I'm reading that Curaleaf, or I shouldn't speak to the name of the company. I believe it was them, but I don't know for sure, so I'll take that back. But it was definitely a cannabis company, a multi-state operator, that it took them $40 million to get that case to the Supreme Court. How is that a thing? It
I
should be.
don't know. I don't know. The wheels of justice are they'll move swiftly if you have money, but
Yeah,
not if you
exactly.
don't.
That's
And that's
crazy.
another whole other issue. But it's true in the United States.
Yeah,
There's a shortage of public defenders in almost every county in Wisconsin.
yeah.
It doesn't pay well enough or whatever. But if you need a public defender because you don't have money for your own attorney, then you're in deep trouble.
Right. Banana Republic. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Got it, Peter.
But yeah, hey, Phil, really appreciate your time. Look forward to watching you in your journey. Trying to help spread the word about what you're trying to do, and appreciate the views and the perspective you bring to politics. I think it's something that, in my opinion, we definitely need. Um, but that's not necessarily related to cannabis, but just politics in general, and seeing the landscape of trying to legalize cannabis. It definitely has a lot more stickiness to it than you would think it would.
Stickiness.
Yeah, you like that? It's the
Yeah.
stickiness. So, but really appreciate your time, Heather. Thank you for being here. You have my vote. Thanks, Phil.
Go to, you
Anything for
guys that
you?
are listening, you can go to my website or you can friend me on Facebook too. I'm all over Facebook and Twitter. So if you want to
Awesome.
follow along or you want to, especially those of you who operate businesses, I'd love to connect. Definitely. As a matter of fact, I didn't tell you this, Bobby, but my daughter is the general manager at one of the Knuckleheads locations here in Madison.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
So
Awesome.
she's also a source for various things for me too.
Sure.
An advocate and a libertarian. So
Okay. Well, very cool, man. I look forward to catching up sometime when I'm down there. I'm down there quite a well now that they're not in session. It's been hit or miss, but we'll definitely have to catch up. I'll get in touch with you about HempFest, and hope you have a great weekend, Phil, and everybody who stopped in.
thanks, you too, Bobby, and thanks everyone for watching and listening.
Yeah. Have a good night, everybody. We'll catch you later. See you next week. End in the stream. I got to come up with a little video.